continue to celebrate the API Heritage Month. As you know, some of you are going to say, oh, it's in May, right? We're celebrating a little bit earlier this year just because there's a lot of events that are happening in May, commencement, finals, and we thought that this would be a good time to really get people in here. So, quick introduction. During Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, communities celebrate the achievements and contributions of Asians and Pacific Islanders with community festivals, government-sponsored activities, and educational events for students. API Heritage Month is an important time to remember and celebrate our unique cultural backgrounds and heritages. This month-long celebration can help build a better cross-cultural understanding between different ethnic backgrounds through the sharing of stories, experiences, art, and history. As the university and communities grow and diversify, it is important to recognize our difference to create a place of inclusivity. So my name is Leung, and I'm the current chair of the AFSN, Asian Faculty and Staff Network. And today we hope to have a really good discussion with you, and we encourage everyone to ask questions, and really this will become much more lively with interaction from the audiences. So this is something we've been practicing for the past couple of years, just a land acknowledgement. The land on which we gather today and its surrounding areas are still home to many indigenous communities. We are grateful for all indigenous people who continue to care for and remain interconnected with this land. We promise to be conscientious stewards of this land for future generations. We say this in order to respect the people who came before us here at Cal State University, Bakersfield. So, this is a quick summary of what I just said earlier, but that is what API Heritage Month is and what we are celebrating. And these are our current members. If you are interested in being part of it, if you're a faculty or staff, please contact us. My contact information will be at the end of this. And this is a cool thing that we will be doing this year. You guys can look around too if you want, it's okay. So, call to stories and experiences. We would like to invite you to share your stories of your own, your parents, your grandparents, and or other family members and friends. So that QR code sends you to a portrait survey to where you can ask your grandparents about their experiences, type it up, and our goal is to create this gallery to where when you go online, this is how I envision it, right? So you have this hallway in the website. When you go in there, you're going to see photos of people. So as you click the arrow button in the hallway as you go forward, you'll be able to click on people within this gallery and see their stories. And it could be a collection of anonymous or people that want to share their stories and their names. So I started off with my grandma actually, so I'm trying to get her experiences. So what we're trying to gather is the stories of immigrants who came to this country. Trying to explore, understand, learn, especially the first generations who came here, in order to share that with the community. Because sometimes it is lost. Once we move here to the United States, it's kind of like, oh, now you need to assimilate, and sometimes we almost forget our heritage, our background. So I'm originally born in the Philippines. I came here 10 years ago, and assimilated, acclimated, and now pretty much, very well versed with America and how it is here, but it's important to always remember that. And sometimes we remember that by reconnecting with our relatives, our elderly who have a lot more experience, who are more versed. And that's what we're trying to create. We're trying to reconnect those background, those heritage, and present it to everybody. So, all right, let's start off with the panel discussion that will be led by Sonia. But first, we'd like the panelists to introduce themselves as well. We'll start off with Manpreet.
Just gonna guess this is on. Hi everyone, good afternoon. I want to give a big thanks to those who have invited us to share today our little pieces of our stories. My name is Manpreet Kaur, and I am a city council member for Ward 7, which is Southwest Bakersfield. As you leave Bakersfield, it's the last kind of district. I was born and raised here in Bakersfield. I'm a first-generation kiddo. My parents immigrated here from Punjab, India, and I I was born and raised in the district that I now represent, kind of grew up on both sides of the 99 and have experienced life on both sides, and went on to be the first in my family to pursue higher education here in the U.S. Went to UC San Diego for my undergrad, and then I came back and I founded the chapter of a community-based organization that focuses on identity, leadership, youth involvement, and community building. And it's the name of the organization is the Jakar Movement, and for the past 7 years that's been kind of my full-time gig in building community locally. I also left home again to go off to grad school to study city planning and public policy in graduate school, and it was the encouragement of my community that kind of pushed me towards leadership and pursuing the city council seat here locally to represent the district I love and grew up in. So that's what I do now, kind of still the full-time, as a true immigrant, working 2 full-time jobs at the city council and at the nonprofit organization. But I deeply value conversations like this that, in which we can talk about these kind of structures of race, society, and kind of different categories we're assigned, but also to explore the value in cross-cultural conversations, multiculturalism, and how we identify with each other with our shared experiences. So looking forward to our conversation today.
Hi, my name is Christina. I'm an undergraduate student here, and I'm also a student assistant worker here. So a bit about me. Both my parents also immigrated, one from Mexico, one from South Korea, and I'm just really excited to share some of my experiences and to share some of my culture with you guys. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, all right. My name is Jeremiah Sataraka. I teach here in the Ethnic Studies Department as a lecturer, so this is my 2nd year. I'll be wrapping up. I was born and raised in Tacoma, Washington, which is kind of the Seattle area. My mother, born and raised in South Korea. And then my father was born and raised in American Samoa. So if you don't know American Samoa is, Polynesian Islands in the South Pacific Ocean. So my father was actually in the U.S. military, where he was stationed in Korea, and he met my mom. And the thing that I love to share is there's 2 versions of that story that my parents like to tell. From my mom's side, they met at a military ball. From my dad's side, they met at a club. So I don't know which one is true. Yeah, right, it's the same. So they met, and then moved to Tacoma, Washington, which is where I was born. I did my undergraduate studies at Wefaq University, a small private school in Washington. And then worked for a couple years, nonprofit work, and then eventually found myself in the Central Valley. And before this, I was working for a nonprofit in Fresno, where I was hired to do a lot of the COVID-19 work when COVID-19 first appeared. So I was doing a lot of work with Southeast Asian communities, a lot of Hmong, Vietnamese, Cambodian, and Thai folks. And now I'm here, and another thing that I love about being at CSU is connecting the Pacific Islander communities. So it was really through my work in Fresno where we started a group called the Central Valley Pacific Islander Alliance. And there's actually Pacific Islanders in Bakersfield, as well as Stockton and Fresno. So we were able to meet some people in those 3 cities, created this organization. So currently it's a fiscally sponsored program, so not a nonprofit, but we'll see what happens in the future. This weekend we're actually hosting a Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Youth Conference. So we have youth, about 40, coming down to CSUB for an all-day, one-day conference. So excited to be here and share space with these folks.
Good morning, I'm Patrick Leung. I was born in China and I did my grade school in China. But when I went to Hong Kong, I was raised in Hong Kong under the British system. So actually that's my first assimilation in a different society because I was raised as a grade school. So when I went to Hong Kong at that time, I did not know any English at all. But under the British, English is the first language. So I had to assimilate myself, and also I took Chinese as a second language. Because you have to take a second language to pass the exam. So at that time, I can take French, you can take Chinese. So I took French for about a semester. Later I thought, that's silly, I'm Chinese, I should at least know my Chinese. So then I took my Chinese as second language. And then later on, I finished my medical school in Hong Kong and came over here to do my postgraduate studies and so on. And then later on, came to Bakersfield to start my allergy practice. I've been in Bakersfield for practicing allergy for more than 42 years, and I just retired last year. Okay, so I've been involved in the Chinese community for a long time because I was one of the first few Chinese doctors that came to Bakersfield at that time. In those days, there's not many Chinese doctors in town. So I met Dr. Chan, who was one of the early pioneer Chinese doctors in town, and Ruby Chan, which is one of the older Chinese long-time member. She took me around and showed me the community and took me in, and boy, then ever since that I've been involved in the Chinese community. So now I'm the chairman of Confucius Church, which is one of the Women's Association started more than 100 years ago. And I'm running a Chinese language school, which has been running for more than 100 years now. It's free to the community. So when we celebrate the 100 years anniversary at that time, TV stations, the media came all over the country, from China, from Taiwan, and said, we have never heard of Chinese school for 100 years in America. I said, that's it. And also we have never heard one that does not charge any money for 100 years. And that's what we are still doing at this time. And also involved in the Yangon Association, which is the Merchants Association. So basically I'm pretty active in those days. So, and it's very nice to be here to share the story with all of you.
Hi everyone, my name is Nina Ha, and I was born in Taipei, Taiwan, to two Taiwanese, very proud Taiwanese Americans. My dad was in the Taiwanese Symphony Orchestra, so he was a trombone player, a trumpet player, a musician. My mom was actually a magician, so she had her own assistant, and it was just very non-traditional jobs, so I was really happy to be raised in that environment. My parents really believed in making sure that my siblings and I chased after our dreams. We didn't have to become doctors or lawyers, but we could do what made our hearts happy, and that's kind of what I'm hoping to do with my own kids. My daughter Ashley is here in the front row with me today. She is actually an aspiring performer. She's going to be going to school in the fall for musical theater in New York or Boston, depending on where she makes her final decision. Just really proud to be here. I'm so happy that you invited me, Sonia. And I came to America when I was 5 years old, and then assimilated pretty quickly because I think the first word that I learned was egg. And I would play on the playground, and I would come back to my mom and say, they said, what is your name? And I just said, egg. She's like, no, you have to tell them your name. So I actually came up with my own name. My name is Leung, but when I was 5 years old, my mom said, would you like to pick an English name? And I said, well, I really am really busy right now, Mom. I want to go out and play, so you pick one. She's like, no, your sister spent 3 days researching her name, and she chose Linda. What about you? And I said, okay, well, I think the landlady, what's her name? Nina? Sounds good, put her name. So here I am. I'm currently in Bakersfield. I've been here for about 20 years. And my husband moved here with me after we got married. He works for Kaiser Permanente, and I used to be a TV news reporter. So I would wake up early in the morning, Channel 29 with Aaron Perlman, and I would say, good morning, I'm Nina Ha, thanks for waking up with us. And now I get to sleep in, so life is good. I was a recent member of the Bakersfield Chinese Learning Club. As president, I served for 3 years during the pandemic, and luckily was able to pass the baton over to Dr. Leung's wife, Maria. And we have some members here today. We've got Irene, we've got Karen, and yeah, thank you for being here. I'm just so happy to share my stories of growing up and being Asian American. Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, I am Wefaq Alshami. I am a junior. I am majoring in biology, minoring in chemistry, and pursuing a medical field. I am the Director of International Students Relations. The reason why I chose this position is because, not international students, but because I share a lot of experiences with those international students that experience linguistic barriers, culture shock, and difficulty or struggling to find a sense of belonging. My family and I, except my mom, we came to the United States in the late August of 2016. My mom was left behind and then she joined us 4 years later. Yay! And then I heard her speaking about how egg was her first word in English to learn, and it just reminded me of my first song in English. It was Baby by Justin Bieber. Traumatizing. Every time I listen to this song, I remember every day, I wake up in the morning, I go walk to school in the very hot sun, and it's like, I think it was like 15 to 20 minutes of school, back and forth, and it's like in Dew, that's where I came here first, and I've experienced a lot of difficulties, a lot of struggles until today, and I'm still learning and growing. I don't think that my knowledge is as rich as my fellow panelists, but I think I'm hoping to give you some of my experiences that could benefit you to learn more about us. Thank you.
Thank you to the panelists. Ni hao, Vietnamese, this is Su Wen. So for anyone that doesn't speak Mandarin, hi, my name is Su Wen. My English name is Sonia Silva, and I work in our International Students and Programs office. Hi, all my colleagues out there and everyone in the room. As you can see, our distinguished panel is very diverse. And when I think about diversity, I think about when we talk about our differences, we really see how common we all are. I'm looking forward to a really rich and robust conversation today. We're going to do a Q&A. Please answer any questions that you feel comfortable with. If you don't feel comfortable, you don't need to say anything. After our panel, we're going to do 5 minutes with Dr. Leung to talk about the Chinese population, the history of it, and then also to Councilmember Kaur about her new role with the city. So what are some meaningful cultural traditions for your families? Anyone?
So when I think of the word family, I kind of think of my ethnic community as well as kind of the local community that I've grown up in, which I consider kind of South Bakersfield. But within our own traditions, so in Punjabi culture, Punjab is like in northern India. And India itself, I think today was named like the most populous country in the world. The cultures are so diverse, there's so many different languages. But some of the most meaningful, I think, cultural traditions would be food, community, and dance for Punjabis. So just a fun fact, if you're going to an Indian restaurant here locally, it's more than likely that everything on the menu is actually Punjabi food. So that's just something for you to know when you go to an Indian restaurant. Just because I think the local community is more so of northern India, and so the food patterns are much more similar. But you know, food brings people together. I think instead of my grandmother asking me how I'm doing, she says, "What did you eat today?" And that's her version of saying, "I care about you." So I think food plays such an important role in bringing people together. I think it's the first thing we think of when we're planning a wedding or a gathering of any kind. Where is the food coming from and what are we making? So I would say food and then dance, and I think they just kind of go hand in hand. Music plays a really important part in Punjabi culture. A lot of the instruments that we use have been created by folks within the same cultural geographic area, region, and they're shared across different cultures like Persian culture and others. So I think those traditions carry on, and the fact that they can carry on across oceans, I think is very meaningful as well. Of course, it doesn't taste the same as it does when you're in Punjab or in your homeland. I think they say the water and the ingredients are the ones that make the difference, but the commitment to creating those same delicacies and food being something that passes culture on, I think is very meaningful. And so I would say food is the main one.
So definitely would agree, food brings us all together, but personally I would say family gatherings are a huge part for me. To be specific, I'd say maybe the Korean Lunar New Year. That's a big one I partake in, and normally it falls towards the end of January or the beginning of February, but we normally go ahead and just celebrate it during the American New Year because that's when everyone's home and we all have time to gather. And it's really special to me because we get to do a lot of traditional acts and we make the food together and just a lot of quality time together. For instance, we do this tradition where it's called Sebe, which is basically the younger folks of the family gather in front of the older folk, and we basically show our respect for them by bowing down to them, and as we bow down, we just say, we wish you luck in the new year, and in return they give us some positive wishes, such as, I hope you have great health in the new year, or you get married this year, and then typically they give us a little envelope of cash. And then my favorite part about that is actually when we make this soup called tteokguk, and basically it's a Korean rice cake soup. And traditionally, when you eat this on the new year, it gives you one more year, so you age 1 year when you eat it. So I definitely appreciate those family gatherings where I get to see my family just reconnect.
We're all going to Chris's for New Year's. Anyone else?
For Chinese, I have to agree that food is very important thing. One thing you don't know, I'm from Hong Kong, and for the southern part of Chinese, the first greeting when you meet somebody is not ask how are you doing. The first greeting we actually ask them, have you eaten yet? That's the actual greeting. So that's very important. But as far as the Chinese culture is concerned, yes, the festivals are usually the big time that we try to pass on to our kids. And it looks like the Chinese celebrate throughout the whole year. Chinese New Year is the major thing. Celebration is not just one day. The celebration goes on for at least a few weeks, way beyond the first month of the new year. Okay, we have celebrations for every day. Even for the Chinese community, the Chinese Women's Club just passed their celebrations last month, and the Yinghuan Association, we have the celebrate Chinese New Year next Monday, the coming Monday. So we still keep on going throughout the whole springtime. That's what it is. And there's a lot of decorations that is quite different for Chinese New Year, per se, because for Christmas, you bring in a Christmas tree. For Chinese New Year celebration, we don't bring in a tree, we bring in a blossoming flower, actually a whole peach tree full of blossoms. That culture, we're still doing that for a long, long time. In my family, we've been doing that for more than 60 years in my father's days. And in America, every year, I will go out there to get some fresh flowers and put in the house. Narcissus, peach flowers, blossoming flowers that go inside the house. We make it like springtime. The other thing that the kids will enjoy as tradition is giving them the lucky money. We don't buy them toys, but that time the kids are rich. Whenever we see everybody, we say, 恭喜發財, that means wish you prosperous. And the second thing you give them is a red money, lucky money pocket. So they have a lot of money. That's the tradition. We still keep going and going and going. And they get it from all the relatives. Anytime they see a relative, the first thing they will say to them is 恭喜發財, and they will get the money. So yes, they will do that. Okay. And they are rich. But as far as the parents are concerned, for us, it doesn't matter how old the kids are. Even when I went home, even though when I'm 50 years old, my parents still will give it to me. That culture still keep on going. So there's a lot of other cultures that are very important. We try to institute the kids the importance of family in the kids. That's part of the most important thing in the Chinese family. Eating, we always sit down together at dinner table as a family. We don't just take our plate and walk off somewhere else to watch TV. No, you cannot do that. And then before you start eating, you have to greet the elders first, and please go ahead first. We still teach our kids that what they have to do. They have to wait until the elders, the senior members start eating, and they will start eating. They cannot just go and take a plate and just walk off somewhere else. That's really important. So this is one of the very important culture in the Chinese culture, the respect of the seniors, and that goes back to one of the festivals, you visit the graves to respect the seniors, the early pioneers. Even here in Bakersfield, the Chinese community still will go and visit the grave of the pioneers 2 times a year, in the springtime and the fall. So that's what we do. This is a very traditional thing that we pass on each other to respect the seniors, to respect the family as a unit.
So as I mentioned, I'm from Yemen, and it's an Islamic country, and my family, I'm from a Muslim background. A lot of our culture is very influenced by religion, and a lot of it can be very beautiful. So this month is called the month of Ramadan, which basically people fast from sunrise to sunset, and then they break the fast during the sunset. And it keeps going for a whole month, and at the end of the month, we have a big celebration, which brings people together. It brings a lot of sense of community, a lot of sense of belonging. When people eat food, they dance, or they give each other money. It's usually the men that give the women money. I think one of the main things that I do really appreciate with my culture is we don't put a lot of emphasis on individualism. We put a lot of emphasis on the collective work of community. We have a lot of communities knowing each other. It's kind of like families, and we have also great food, great dances, and also off topic, I work for Trio. It's hands down one of the best working environments on campus, and I do appreciate them being back there supporting me. But I once brought them food. It's called sambusa, and I think that's also an Indian food as well. And you can ask them for feedback, but you're next, Sonia, and I'll give you some. But yeah, food and dances, and there are so many beautiful aspects of my culture that I would like to keep to myself and also pass it from generation to another if I decide to have kids. Thank you.
I think growing up in Taiwan for the first 5 years of my life was so much fun because there are really amazing traditions that unfortunately I won't be able to pass on to my kids just because of the sheer logistics of it. My dad was from a town called Zhongli, and it's kind of a countryside, and one of the things that they in that city participated in was this big contest with all the other neighboring cities. They would fatten up a pig and then have it on display in this massive truck, and then they would drive it around town with lots of loud music. If I did that in Bakersfield, I'm not sure how that would fly. But it was really neat to see my parents and grandparents with so much pride when they raised the pig, and then they would do a weigh-in to see which pig was the heaviest and which would win. They were very hairy pigs. They were in this big box, and I guess they were sort of splayed on this box. And anyway, it was just quite the sight for a 5-year-old to take in. Another tradition that I really loved was the Lantern Festival. When I was a kid, every year we'd look forward to it because I think the lanterns are supposed to ward away evil. And so you get to go to these carts, these vendors would come around with brand new umbrellas and lanterns, and you get to just look and see which ones you wanted. So I would pick a brand new lantern every year. I think one year I got this really cool looking fish, and you would just place a little light in the middle, and there was a stick, and you just walk around at night with your friends, walk around the neighborhood and ward away evil. So those were really fun, but now that I'm older, living in the States, I think food has definitely become our tradition. My mom is an amazing chef, so she would make all these delicacies that we would enjoy year-round, and fortunately for me, she makes enough so I can bring it back here and heat it up for the kids. Unfortunately, I don't cook. So my daughter once, she said, "I can help you cook dinner tonight, Mom. I know how to push buttons on the microwave." So yeah, I can't pass those traditions on, but I can talk about them. I'm a writer, so I can write about them, and I can teach my kids through all the stories of their grandmas and grandpas and my mom and dad and their yaya and their nai. So that's how I plan to pass it on.
Let me do an addition to your Lantern Festival. You know that America, we have St. Valentine's Day. The Lantern Festival is actually the Chinese Valentine's Day. because they have all the displays of lanterns outside. Usually in the old days, the girls are not allowed to go outside the house. So that's the time they're allowed to go outside to look at the lanterns. And that's the place where the men can meet the girls. That's where that's called Chinese Valentine's Day. So that's why we went out to see the lanterns.
Anti-Asian violence has risen throughout the United States, particularly during the pandemic. If you're comfortable, can you share your feelings about these issues?
Just keep this going with the pattern of speaking, but you know, it was very alarming to see the rise of anti-Asian hate, and especially it being so blatant, I think, and maybe the stresses of the pandemic or whatever the nature of it was, but in every way it was hurtful to see, it was hurtful to read, and not just associated with assumptions folks were making related to COVID-19, but also, you know, I can share within my own community, we saw just hate crimes and violence increase against Sikh Americans. I think the FBI documented it was something by like 200%. And so not only as a community-based organization were we addressing how to make sure folks were staying healthy, if they had masks, if their employment rights were protected, but we were also dealing with a number of really unfortunate cases where elderly Sikh individuals who traditionally they adorned the turban were targeted and actually even brutally murdered in some of the cities across the Central Valley. Even locally there were some cases, but of course I think the issue also is not only are these crimes happening, but there isn't a proper way for them to be reported and justice being brought to some of these incidents that are coming, to any of the incidences that happen. And I think that's also the unfortunate part, that's the missing piece that folks are looking for, is something that validates that this is wrong, this is not how a society should function, a community should be. People should not be living in fear just because of their identity. But that's also the truth of living in kind of a post 9/11 era for Sikh Americans. And kind of being in that specific category and then being in the larger Asian American category, I think it brings both kind of, I think it's just, yeah, the misunderstandings, the lack of kind of, I guess, willingness to understand communities that may be different from our own. And I think it's upon all of us to challenge ourselves to get to know communities that go beyond our own ethnic belonging or identity, and kind of reach out to, you know, all the information we have available via the internet. But it is something that we still deal with. It's something, as you know, now that I'm on the city council, I hear about all of the local incidences that happen. Before my community really didn't have a voice or where to turn to, or an avenue to find the right resources. And now that they kind of see me there, I'm dealing with everything that includes hate crimes as well, that just really go under the radar, but other types of violence as well. So it's kind of figuring out solutions that are community-based, but also give folks who are targeted a sense of justice and what that means to people. And I think the pandemic really heightened everything that was kind of awful. But it's the truth that we have to face, and we have to know that that is our reality as a society and as a nation.
Yeah, definitely agree. And I think it's safe to say that the Asian American community felt largely scapegoated for the whole COVID-19 pandemic, and it was really disheartening to see that even during that time our government officials and leaders were kind of egging that on, adding to the whole anti-Chinese rhetoric, the whole Wuhan virus, the Chinese virus. So it was really discouraging just to feel like we didn't really have a safety blanket, no one to turn to other than, I suppose, ourselves, our own community. So I guess that was a pro that came out of it. We kind of became stronger and built a greater community and realized that we aren't alone. But it was a very difficult time to go through, I would say.
mean, I would agree with what panelists have just said. I think something to add more context to this for me is really this history of racism in the country, right? And the latest example of anti-Asian violence being the COVID-19 pandemic. But before that, you have numerous other examples, right? 9/11. You have the Japanese internment camps. You have the Chinese exclusion laws. So there have been moments in our history where this has happened. So for me, it's nothing new. It's unfortunate and it's devastating. But I think in each instance, there's always been communities who have resisted and fought back against those laws, these policies, these actions. Right? We still see that today. So one thing that comes to mind is when people were first, and still, saying that this was a Chinese virus, there were people, other Asian Americans who were wearing t-shirts saying like, I'm not Chinese, or I'm Korean, or I'm Japanese, right? And that's another tactic that we've seen in this country, right? I mean, with the Japanese internment camps, you also had Chinese folks who were wearing I'm Chinese to delineate and separate the fact that they were Japanese, not Chinese, or they were Chinese, not Japanese, and other Asian Americans have done that. So I think that's a direct response to really a systemic issue that exists and our need for survival. And those examples aren't the greatest, right? But that's a reality that a lot of us have kind of been forced to live in. And so, okay, what do we do to protect not only myself, but our families and our communities? And then there's other folks, I think, who we can look up to, who have stood up and said, okay, I'm not Japanese during the Japanese internment camps, but this is wrong, let's do something about it. And because they stood up with folks, right, they were able to ultimately win some Supreme Court cases that ended or shut down the internment camps, right? And I think that's something that we can learn time and time again is, these voices, folks who have been brave enough, who some aren't even Asian American, but working in solidarity with Asian Americans, to address those issues. And then on a personal level, I remember the first time, I think I was in elementary school, I was on a bus, and, minding my business, I was a pretty quiet kid. And this person in front of me turns around and says, I don't like you because you're Asian. And I was like, the first thing that came up my mind was, what is Asian? Like, I didn't really understand what that was, so I went home and I told my mom, I was like, Mom, somebody told me they don't like me because I'm Asian. And I was like, what is that? And she's like, well, that's a part of what we are, you're Korean. But you're also Samoan from your dad's side. So I think also for me, kind of living as a multiracial, born queer person here in the States has given me like a lot of layers in, analyzing, connecting with things like anti-Asian violence or, the shooting at Club Pulse in Florida, right? I think all these different events aren't necessarily just separate things that impact just those people, but for a lot of us, we have these, multiple layers to identity. So for me, it's been powerful to see how others have kind of joined forces to address these issues, and something, again, that has been done in history.
Well, as you said that through the history, there's a lot of anti-different cultures and different people. You mentioned about Chinese Exclusion Act in the 1800s. Okay, in those days, a Chinese is not even allowed to testify in court. So that's the time that you cannot testify against a white man because your testimony is not acceptable in court. So in those days, if a white man kills an Asian, no, even you saw it, you cannot go to court and say, he did it. No, you cannot, okay? And even in those days, if an American marry a Chinese, that lady had to give up their American citizenship in order to marry a Chinese. And we have actually one case in Bakersfield, Alice Wong, she's born in America, she's American. But when she married a Chinese man, she had to give up her Chinese citizenship. Later on, when the law was removed, that in the 1960s, in the Kennedy's time, in our time, she came back to that tribe to become an American citizen. In her naturalization paper, there always mentions what's your previous citizenship. The paper said previous citizenship is America, and now you naturalize back into America. Okay, that's how it was before. So anti-Asian, anti-Chinese, or anti-any other culture is not a new thing. It's just that it will pop up periodically. When something crisis happens, they always put the blame on somebody else to find a target to tie a victim to that. I just came back from Oakland, Chinatown, to attend a Chinese celebration. And I was surprised at how come all the shops and restaurants were closed by 6 o'clock. What happened was that about 2 weeks ago, there's a big anti-Chinese situation, and they vandalized more than 10 restaurants and robbed more than 10 restaurants. So that's terrible. So that's why the shop closed. It's become unsafe to do that. One of the reasons why they did it is because the people say, don't worry, you can rob the Chinese because they don't fight back. They were not there to rob the Korean because Koreans will fight back. That's what they do. You hear about the riot in Los Angeles in those days. The Korean would take up the gun and cut every street corner. But Chinese, they did not do that. So their idea, they said, go and rob the Chinese. They're okay, they will not fight back. That's one of the reasons why. Now my son teaches Kung Fu on voluntary basis in Voluntary Park. And actually, he organized quite a number of events in the Chinese community for self-defense situation. Under this anti-Asian situation, they have organization. They volunteer, they teach them how to do self-defense in case you're attacked. But then what should you do? So the Kung Fu is not to try to bully the people, but to do self-protection. Kung Fu is not a fight against guns. I told my son, you cannot win over guns. If they open a fire on you, whatever Kung Fu you have, you will not work. But if somebody try to rob you, somebody try to put the hand on your neck and try to bully you, you can fight back. That's what he's trying to do, to teach the people. Maybe actually invite him back to Bakersfield to teach the Chinese community, the community here, to do the self-defense.
For our family during the pandemic, in the early stages, my husband worked for Kaiser as a family doctor, so we pretty much buckled down and we stayed home for, gosh, way longer than anyone else, really. And one of the things about all the things we were hearing, all the stories about the hate crimes against elderly community, my daughter and son were just very shocked at everything that was happening, and they were just very, very concerned about their grandparents. And my parents, basically, they go on walks every single day, and we just were scared that something would happen. You know, hearing about the gentleman up north who just was walking around his block and he was pushed to his death. And you know, we've always been raised to be proud of our community, and so I made these fun decorations. In the Chinese community, if you have this symbol and you hang it upside down, it's supposed to bring you luck. And so we had this up, but we didn't have it up on our front door because I didn't feel safe to do that. So I'll show you really quickly what this is. Do you know the name of this character?
Yeah, this is
Luck. Okay, so this is the word luck, and it's upside down. It says Happy Lunar New Year. And then every year I can change out the animal to be whatever the zodiac sign is. And
I don't know why you want to hang it upside down.
because dao, the word, right?
It's being held upside down because it rhymes with the word coming. That means you welcome the luck to come.
Yes.
It only happens mainly in Taiwanese. Not as much in the mainland China. They do that.
Oh, okay. So I want to be proud of my heritage, but I also want to be smart and not put my family in danger. So during the early stages of the pandemic, my daughter actually had a friend say something to her, and I just want to invite her up to share her experience and also talk about what she did during the pandemic to shed light on what was happening and to just open the discourse about all the things, all the crimes that were occurring. So Ashley Ha, she is actually the founder and content creator for @Broadway_corner on Instagram. And so I'll have you come up and just share that a little bit.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm a senior at Sataraka High School, and I'm about to head off to college for musical theater, which you never really see any Asian American people do. So I don't know, that's pretty cool. But yeah, during the pandemic, right at the beginning, I was a freshman. And I had a friend who just was joking about, just even Asian people in general. I had two other friends who are also Asian, Cambodian, and Vietnamese. And he was just joking like, oh, you guys have COVID or whatever, and just saying all these hurtful things. And then when we went into lockdown, this was also before I really knew about my culture and what representation meant to me. And so after having a lot of time to just really think about it, I realized how harmful it really was. And just how much it affected me on a daily basis, because even in places like a school where you should be able to just go have fun, talk to your friends, it's like you can still have these different microaggressions happen to you. And then last summer I had the opportunity to study musical theater at NYU for just a summer for a pre-college program. And even there, I was mistaken for another Asian girl in a class. Like, I got kind of targeted in a way where one of the scenes I was performing, my character was explicitly Chinese, and I was just kind of confused, because you think, oh, it's New York, it's someplace where everyone should be accepted, but instead I still felt kind of pigeonholed into, oh, she's the Asian girl, she's the girl who, can do this or can do that, or, oh, I can't even tell that you're a different person, even though it's like, okay, I'm an individual, and that should be celebrated instead of taken as something confusing. And so on my Broadway Instagram account, I try my best to really promote Asian American and Asian people. I've been a very big supporter of the Broadway show K-pop, that it closed after 1 month because there was just apparently no audience for it. People weren't going, the marketing wasn't working, and we didn't feel seen in that situation. And so it closed, and people would consider it a Broadway flop, even though it did so much, having a 99% Asian cast and having so many different people represented on a stage, not just Korean, but Chinese, Filipino, and Taiwanese as well. And so just taking all those things too is representation matters, because when you see yourself, you feel like you belong. And also when people who aren't Chinese or aren't Asian get to see that representation, they kind of see you as a person instead of an idea. And if we have stereotyped Asian characters or movie archetypes being represented, it doesn't really give you the full perspective on who a person is unless you really get to see them as a specific experience. Because I think someone said earlier, like, the more specific an experience is, the more universal it feels. And I'm a strong believer in that, because for me, I feel very isolated or lonely as being Asian American, but if someone were to, make a story out of it, make a TV show or movie or something, I think people who would watch it would have more of an understanding of what different people go through, have more empathy, and really be able to understand. And then things like this, hate crimes and different attacks would not happen because we would understand each other instead of trying to attack each other.
Thank you. Councilmember Kaur, you better watch out. You might take your seat. How have you seen the United States change in terms of offering support and community for the AAPI communities? If so, what change have you seen?
I want to start by working off of some of the points made about the Chinese Exclusion Act and learning the history of how long my own ethnic community has been in the United States was very important for myself in understanding what also prevented my community from being in the United States. So through the Chinese Exclusion Act, a lot of Sikhs or Punjabis or folks who came from India were also barred from entering. So we've kind of had multiple waves of migration. Our earliest record of being in the United States actually goes back to the 1800s. And just along with the Chinese, the Sikhs were also building the railroad systems in the United States, also throughout Canada. But I think that's what I also value about being able to identify with other folks who identify as Asian American, is that when it comes to some kind of legislation like the Chinese Inclusion Act, then we are all categorized under the same kind of the same restrictions, I would say. then there is really no difference between the groups. It's kind of like everyone is this one big category, and the same things will apply to everybody without kind of the nuance. And to the points made about, that's why it's valuable for us to be in solidarity with each other, is to know that everybody's experiences are nuanced, but they are still a shared experience. They are the American immigration stories of places like Bakersfield, of places like the Central Valley, and have made why we settled here, but also what prevented us from settling here. So, communities that could have built the railroad systems of the country that connected goods across the states are still then barred from being able to have citizenship and calling this place officially home. No matter how much they contributed, and that history gets kind of erased. And within the United States, the changes that I've seen in terms of support, I think come from the communities. I think that change has been brought from folks sitting up here who have identified why it's valuable to see change and to kind of plant your flag and say, we're here, we've created these institutions where you can learn your language, you can take ethnic studies classes, you can have clubs that have representation, or social media being a platform to really elevate the stories that are not often come to the mainstream, or having kind of these the mixed race experiences as well within even an Asian category. Those are the nuances that we don't get to talk about often enough. So I think the changes come from individuals and organizations who have pushed the narrative, have pushed themselves and the communities forward and saying, we do belong here, we have space, and we actually share the space because we are checking the same box on the census, and that is what's giving us this racial category as well. And I appreciate the point we made of, I didn't even realize I was Asian until somebody told me. Same for me, I really didn't know what made me different until somebody pointed it out. And it was, my shared experience was how well could I, go on the monkey bars with my, my fellow students, or play dodgeball, or those were the commonalities at a younger age. But then to be reminded of your differences, or to be reminded of your race, then also creates room for, why it's important to celebrate the differences that have been created. But it's actually a way of reclaiming the narratives and reclaiming our identities in a way that then is something you can pass on to like the next generation. And I think there's such a moment being had with Asian Americans in film as well. And that's been something that I've been personally celebrating, and that kind of being something that's come to the mainstream in a way that I myself haven't seen before. I've experienced it when people were like, oh my God, I started watching Bollywood movies on Netflix. And I'm like, yeah, that's very cool. I mean, I grew up watching those as well, and it's a new way of feeling seen, but also I guess it doesn't have the nuance of the day-to-day. So there's value in that. There's a lot mixed there, but I think my point is it comes from the individuals or the communities kind of creating and breaking those barriers, whether it be in media, in language, in identity, in education, and we're all better for it.
So I think I'd like to share that. So I was born and raised here in Delano, California. So I always grew up trying my best. I'm really ashamed of it now, but I tried my best to really hide my cultural background because I was the minority and I did not want to be a minority. I wanted to be like everyone else. I wanted to fit in. And I believe the pandemic was one of the biggest events in which I realized, I am different. I am, and I felt like those support groups that came out of there, like the rallies that were going on specifically in the Bay Area where it's more heavily populated with Asian American communities, I saw that on the news, and I saw that sense of community and togetherness that I never had felt before, and I realized I want to feel that on a daily basis, and that was when I took pride in who I am and realized it's important to surround yourself with people, similar people, because it's important to connect with that type of background. And I'm not saying you can only have your Asian friends, no, I'm saying it does add value, it definitely add value to your friendship and to your lifestyle. And I also wanted to touch on how I appreciate all of the support groups that came out of the COVID-19 pandemic, such as just to name one, the Stop Anti-Asian, American Asian, Pacific Islander Hate, because it did arise solely for the surge that came from the COVID-19 pandemic, and it kind of tracks and reports all the instances in which anyone felt attacked or witnessed anything aggressive or violent, just to bring attention to the situation. All the news coverage was definitely super helpful, and I appreciated that so much because it did gain more supporters and more opportunity for donations for those organizations to further hinder and try to put a stop to the whole hate crimes.
So I'll try to start with a personal story and then move on to maybe more of a macro level analysis that I have in my head. I'm trying to keep it short. So I think in some ways it really hasn't changed. One example that I can think of is when I used to bring lunches to school made for my mom. She's Korean. I love her food, right? She made stuff called like kimbap, which is kind of like sushi, but doesn't have raw fish. Actually, you can put anything in kimbap, and I like hot dogs. So she would put hot dogs in my kimbap. And I went to school and opened up my lunch box and was eating kimbap and got a lot of stares and a lot of comments. Like, oh, what is that? Like, oh, that stinks, or that looks like sushi. And a friend was like, man, you're young, you know what sushi is? Yeah. But, for me, I was like, food is an important part of culture, right? And I felt really ashamed because of the fact that I brought a lunch that wasn't really being accepted in mainstream, in my mainstream schooling experience. Another example, so race, for all of us that don't understand, is a social construct, right? We've made this up. It's not based on biology, it's not based on genetics, but the consequences of that idea are definitely real. So in this, living a multiracial identity, Korean and Samoan, another example in elementary school, a lot of events that happened to us as a young kid, we remember forever. So I was wearing something called the Wefaq, and it's like a wrap. Right? You see a lot of it in Pacific Islands, right? In Samoans it's called Wefaq, so it's a formal wrap. And a aloha shirt, similar to what I'm wearing now. And we had an event after school, and it was also Culture Day, so that's the reason why I worn that, right? So everybody in elementary school was encouraged to wear your cultural gear, and I was like, well, I have this made, I want to wear it, I'm proud. But throughout the whole day, I would get teased, right? Because they're like, why are you dressing like a girl? Like, you're wearing a skirt. And that's what it looks like if you don't know what it is. And it was, even at, I think Jump Rope for Heart was the event. So you raise money and you get people to donate, and at the end of the day, you jump rope and you're raising money for cancer. So that's what I was involved with. And a Samoan woman actually came up and was like, I love your Wefaq. And I was, that changed my whole mood, right? Because somebody recognized, knew what it was. So, in a lot of ways, I still think that idea of being a perpetual foreigner, right, not being American, is still pretty prevalent, and it's still something that we have to face, right? Because when you think about what is professional in terms of hairstyle, clothing choices, that's still very much structured under a norm that's dominated in our society. And any time you fall out of that, you get a lot of backlash, right? But in terms of the AAPI community, I think one of the biggest changes, for me, that I realized is change is very slow on an institutional level. So even the way we gather data, right, AAPI, even that category needs to be, and has been criticized, because you're grouping a whole bunch of diverse peoples into one category, and it just doesn't work. Right, at least with the U.S. Census, since the 2000 census, you have Asian American as a separate racial category than Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, which is great. But a lot of schools, institutions still group the two together, and that's an issue. I think the latest iteration of that has been API and MEDA, so Asian Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, Desi American, right? And again, that gets at okay, it's great and it's very simple to have that Asian American category, and it comes from a really great place, right? A need that young folks actually helped create, because there was a need to address a lot of the systemic issues, right? Unite politically, racially, economically, make some change for our society. And it was also a rejection of Oriental, right? And we know how that's a very outdated racist term. But with API NEDA or SWANA, right, that's another category, I think we're seeing that there is a need to continue that conversation and advocacy in making sure that these diverse groups are represented for who they are, not just for simplicity's sake, but to recognize our humanity and the cultures, the languages, the histories that are represented in these very diverse groups.
That raises some different kind of questions. Now, when we sit over here, the panel over here, to a degree, we belong to a different elite group of the Asian community. We forgot majority of Asian people in America does not belong to a group with the education status or financial status as we are. So when I meet a lot of other people belonging to the club, belonging to other people, the average people, I see a completely different things. They actually see completely different kind of discrimination or anything like that. First of all, they look different. They tell me that it doesn't matter how many times I live, how many generations I live in America, I will still consider as a foreigner by the average people over here, because we look different. We have people over here that have married second generation, third generation over here. People still ask them, where are you coming from? They would tell them, I'm born in America, I'm American, as you are. But no, the people look at you, you are different. It doesn't matter. I told the people, this is something we have to accept. In order for us to be accepted in society, we have to contribute to the society. Only when they see that as society, as a group, as an Asian group, we are a valuable part of the society or community, then they will value us. We cannot say, oh, we are the Asians, so we have to be treated differently. We don't want to be treated differently, but we want to contribute equally and even more to the community. Then we'll be respected. This is how we do. That's what I'm trying to tell the other people, especially the people in the average people, and say, yes, we all face that, we have to accept we are different. But we have to know, we treasure our culture, but this is America, okay? It's a traditional feeling in the old Chinese culture before. They only identify themselves, I'm Chinese, I'm from the old village, I'm from that part of the village, and that's where I'm supposed to go back when I die, even when I die. They never considered this is home. I told them this is one of the first concepts in the chant. You are in America, you're American, you have to be American. It's almost like, I told them, it's almost like you are a daughter, you're a girl, they're married to a new family. Whatever family you marry to, you belong to that family already. You have a tie to your maternal side of family. Or, yes, I have emotional tie to my mom's side of family, but you belong to the half family now. You not belong to the other family. You have to contribute to that family. You will see your value in the half family only when you contribute to the half family. You cannot just, I want to contribute to my own family before. So this is some of the concept I tell the people, you have to do that, you have to change that. In order as a group, we cannot always say, we are Asians, we just say, align with that one. We have to treat America as a whole. We have to contribute to it, be the valuable side of the community. Then we'll be respected as a whole.
Do you have any advice for AAPI communities adjusting to life in the United States, whether they're recent immigrants or those who have been here for generations?
I go back because I have adjusted 2 times. I was born in China, and I studied grade school in China. I went to Hong Kong as a British colony under the British in those days. English is the first language, it's the official language. You go to court, you go to anywhere, you have to use English. Even if you go to Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank, which is owned by British people, I cannot cash a check with you in Chinese. You have to write a check in English to be cashed, okay? So when I first started school in Hong Kong, I remember the first test exam. Everybody is doing a test. I finished the test in 5 minutes. The teacher told my kid, "What are you doing? How can you finish so fast?" I handed them a blank answer paper. I said, "I don't know anything like this. It's blank." Definitely I got it. You know what, great. Okay, all right. But that's the first thing you have to do. Then I have to assimilate and to learn the English and all the things. I did a catch up. So he told me a year to catch up. So that's how it was the first thing I had to do. When I came to America, yes, I had to assimilate and catch up on different things. The first day I arrived in America, I was shocked in a way. I looked at the newspaper, I arrived in New York City. This data said there's about 400 people murdered last year. I said, oh my God, 400 people murdered. I said, that's more than one a day. I said, in Hong Kong, you have murder about once every 6 months or so. Okay, one a day is always shock. And there's a lot of cultural difference that I was doing at that time. I worked at Cook County Hospital, one of the biggest hospital, and if you have watched the movie Fugitive, you will see that's the backdrop for the Cook County Hospital, the backdrop, the doctor over there. So when I was on call, the security guard kept, do not get outside the hospital campus, stay within the hospital campus. I didn't know why. Okay. I was naive, and in Hong Kong it's so safe to walk around in the middle of the night. So I walk around outside during the daytime in the neighborhood, walk across the outer area, went over shopping and come back. And the people asked me, where do you go? I said, I went over there, I just do the shopping, do all the things. They said, you are kidding me. How can you do that? That's a dangerous neighborhood. I said, why? He said, well, maybe they spare you because you're Chinese. I said, really? I said, okay. So that is another shock that I had at that time. The third cultural shock was child abuse. In Oriental country, a child is a very precious thing. You never heard about child abuse in those days. When I did work in a hospital over there, I hardly see any kid of child abuse. But when I work here at Cook County Hospital, every day I see somebody coming in child abuse. I said, oh my God, what country is this? What happened? Okay, so even in Kern County, we are talking about child abuse, well, about 5,000 cases a year in Kern County. That's still quite a lot compared to Hong Kong where I hardly see anyone. So when I was in Chicago, that means I saw it every day in the emergency room. So that was a shock to me. So there's a lot of cultural shock adjustment. So I have to tell the people what to do, what they have to do, because I did all this assimilation and cultural shock at that time. So I tell the people there's a lot of things we are not used to, that we have to accept what it is, but we have to take it, and then we have to contribute to the society. That's what we have to do.
I think one of the issues that we're facing as Yemenis is that Yemen isn't recognized as an Asian country. We tend to be disregarded. I remember one time I went out with my friends, and then one of them said, "Oh, this is the Asian squad." Plus Wefaq. So I wasn't considered to be Asian with them. It was funny at the moment, but I just realized that it might be problematic sometimes, especially on institutional level, because there are so many organizations or groups that are dedicated to support those minorities, or for example Asians, to help them with their unique struggles as minorities. And I think some of the advices that I would give to my community is to represent, advocate, just take pride in your own culture and your own background.
I agree. I think it's so important to speak up and make sure that you are seen and you are heard and you have a seat at the table. You know, when Sonia invited me to be a part of this panel, I thought, well, I'm sure there are a lot of more qualified people who can talk about their backgrounds and cultures, but I'm the only Taiwanese person besides Sonia on this panel, so I need to tell my story too. All of our stories are valid. We need to make sure that we get our stories out there, because the more different and specific stories that people can go off of, we don't just have the stereotypes that are out there. You know, we don't have the stereotype of the dragon lady or the mom who pushes their kid really hard. There's so many different variations of Asian Americans, and we're also dynamic, but we have to make sure we are seen and heard and not just lumped together. And there's the Hmong community, there's the Laotian community, there's so many different intricacies that we have to celebrate. And I think by showing up and speaking up, I'm what I call a reluctant leader. I only serve when I have to. My friend Kathy was looking for a co-leader for their Bible study, and I was like, I'll help if you need me. We needed a president for the Chinese Women's Club. Okay, I'll do it. And then, you know, various organizations, especially news outlets, contact me because, oh, well, Chinese New Year's coming up, or there's a shooting in Monterey Park. Would you like to comment about that? I don't really want to, but if I don't say anything, I don't know who else will. So we have to overcome our shyness, and every day what I do is I pray for strength. I pray that God will put the right words in my mouth, because I get nervous. I don't really like speaking in front of a lot of people. TV news is totally different because there's just one camera and then you're just like hanging out with the camera. But you know, when you're in a room and you can see all the faces, it's a little bit more nerve-wracking. But I think it's so important to have lots of different testimonies, you know, like especially when it comes to television and film, lots of different representations. Hopefully when there are more stories out there, we'll have fewer interactions like the one that my daughter and I had a couple months ago at T-Mobile. A gentleman came up to us and he just kept looking over, and finally he walked over and said, "Are you guys Korean?" And I said, "Excuse me?" And he said, are you Korean? I saw your cross necklace, so I thought maybe you're Korean. And I said, okay, well, I'm not Korean, I'm Taiwanese. And I joked with him, there are plenty of Taiwanese Christians, trust me. And then he proceeded to talk about Chiang Kai-shek, who is one of the political leaders in Taiwan. And then I was wondering, where is he going with all this? And finally I said, you know what, sir? It's actually incredibly offensive that you said that to me, because you know, one way to approach it, because I wanted to educate him, I said, you could come up to someone and say, excuse me, I noticed your necklace, are you Christian? And if they wanted to share their background with you, then they would. But if not, just leave it there. Don't assume anything. And he said, well, I thought you and, is this your daughter? I thought you two were international students. I said, you know, my daughter was born and raised in Bakersfield. This is all she's ever known. She is as American as apple pie. You know, there's no reason for you to believe that she's somehow foreign or just visiting Bakersfield, or me for the matter. So he apologized and he said, you know, no one has ever said this to me. Like, and I don't know how many other people he's offended, but he said, no one has ever educated me that that was an offensive thing to say. And I said, well, I'm glad. I know that you and I are both Christians, so hopefully moving forward, you'll know the right way to approach someone that isn't going to offend them and their whole family. And so he apologized, he walked away, and then he came back a few minutes later with a gift card, and he said, I want you to enjoy some lunch on me. And I was like, no, I really don't want your gift card. Please take your gift card. And he said, no. And he left it, and then he bowed, and he walked away. So yes, representation is important.
So the majority immigrants in those days are coming from Hong Kong or coming from Taiwan. So those are the second phase of the immigration of Chinese to America. The second thing that you're seeing is also before 1950, most of the people that came over here are not the educated people. They are basically the working class people. One thing a lot of people didn't know is that at one time in Kern County, Chinese population constituted about 1/3 of the population. Nobody knew about that. That's the sense of 1880. Population of Bakersfield, I think at that time was around 900. And the Chinese about 200 something. So already that's about 1/3 of that. And then at that time we also had two Chinatowns in Bakersfield. One is near Channel 17 and one is 18 and Q Street. near where Masakali is about. People ask, where are the Chinatown now? They were gone because the earthquake, they destroyed whole Chinatown. So the second generation, they did not need to stay in Chinatown. They dispersed to different areas. And also, you have to look at the job situation in Kern County. In those days, majority of the job is, that they work in is in the farms, in the mines, and also in the railroads. And as time changes, the second generation, they have other kind of opportunities. They went to the big towns, like Los Angeles, San Francisco, other areas. So even we don't retain a lot of the second generation Chinese in town. But if you try to look at the immigration pattern from Chinese to America, you basically talk about, I classify that according to about 3 different phases. The first phase is before the Second World War, before the Communist Chinese took over. In those days, majority of Chinese immigrated to America were from a very tiny area from Guangdong, China. In a very tiny area, it's almost like smaller than Kern County in a part. So that's the reason why in those days, the early immigrants, they all speak Cantonese or Tai-San dialect. Mandarin is the official language over there, but no people came from that part of the country. They only came from a very small part of that. So if you go to Chinatown, even nowadays, Cantonese or Tai-San is official and official dialect in Chinatown. You speak Mandarin, people don't even know what you're talking about in those days. Even when I first came to America, I went to China, I tried to speak Mandarin. Nobody would understand what I was talking about. And I learned my Mandarin after I come into America, although that's my official language. But I'm from Hong Kong, they speak Cantonese, that's it. So that was the first phase of what we call the first immigration. The second phase of immigration coming in is basically after the communists took over in China. And that, a second wave of immigration, they all went through Hong Kong or they went through Taiwan. So the majority of immigrants in those days are coming through Hong Kong or coming through Taiwan. So those are the second phase of the immigration of Chinese to America. The third phase for immigration is what I call the Tiananmen Square in that time. In those days, people have a lot of Chinese students came over from mainland China. They all speak Mandarin. So after Tiananmen Square, a lot of students stayed behind because in those days about 20,000 Chinese students in America. They all stayed behind and then families start to come over. So that's why you start to see the third wave of the immigration coming from China. And that constitutes a lot of the Mandarin speaking people. So now you go to China and go to places, you can speak Mandarin and it's become a very major part of it. So you can see the different situation as far as from where they are coming from. The second thing that you're seeing is also before 1950, most of the people that came over here are not the educated people. They are basically the working class people. The people on the railroads, they work on the restaurants, they work on the shops, and they work on different things. So those are the early immigrants. They are not the doctors, they are not the lawyers, they are not the people like that. After 1950, then you start to see the more educated people coming in. They are the students, the immigrants, and all the things like this. They are from Hong Kong. So you're starting to see the people that are educated, that college educated, but before that you don't. Then after 1990, you start to see the thing. So the stereotype that you see in the Chinese are doing well in school and all the things are all after 1950s. Before, that's not the case. That's not it, okay? So we are seeing a completely different kind of phase, different population that come into America as far as the Chinese immigration is concerned. So this will give you a little summary of what it is.
So I've always been in this district. I've always lived here, except for when I went on to school. So these neighborhoods mean a lot to me. It's where I learned to ride a bike. It's where I learned to drive a car. It's where we were walking to and from school. And so my goal was always that, that's the thing of, I guess my own immigrant parents are not unique in saying that that school was the priority. You know, school is what you focus on. The academics are what you focus on. Everything else comes secondary. And I was also a shy kid who was always reading. Just the other day I was thinking, like, what were my hobbies as a kid? Yeah, I was riding a bike and reading a book, and leaving the public libraries with stacks and stacks of books. We would max out how many books you were allowed to take, and I remember being really disappointed that there was a maximum amount of books you could take from the public library, but we were there every week, and so I'm a public school kid, I'm a public library kid, and I really treasure those experiences because it was a sign of my parents utilizing publicly available systems and resources in order to kind of supplement the education and experiences we were getting at school through, you know, whatever means they had from working full time. And those are the priorities I want to keep at the forefront as well, because the children and the families growing up in my district have similar lived experiences. It's a very diverse district, and folks, you know, understand shared cultures. There's a lot of appreciation for each other's cultures. You know, a lot of neighbors or constituents I run into say, you know, my neighbors are Punjabi, and I think there was a week-long wedding, and how long are you guys' weddings? And you know, then they have similar stories to share about quinceañeras or other things, and so that environment and those themes holding true even today bring me a lot of joy. And now on the city council, I'm really kind of what I call in my orientation phase. I didn't, you know, I've always been interested in serving my community, and so it makes me happy that I get to serve at a very local level. And local politics and government is so different than what we're hearing most often, which is federal government and things happening there. But really, the decisions made at our local government are what are impacting us every single day. And so, having studied urban planning and city planning, I look to and I always prioritize the things that I learned, whether it's making sure people are safe, whether you're walking, cycling, or you're in a car, making sure students have safe routes to schools, and making sure we have affordable housing options, and those real priorities, and emphasizing those week to week, especially in, you know, whatever committees I might be on, and making sure that's a priority, because those are the priorities that residents shared with me when we went door to door. So the role really is, you know, it's listening to what the community shares. It's making sure I'm sharing what I'm learning at the city council. What I like to say is I'm going to take City Hall to the people, to Ward 7, and make sure that there's, we're all of our collective knowledge is growing together and really understanding how these systems work. Because even for myself, having been a community advocate for so many years and being on the other end of it, when I'm sitting at city council, it's a meeting, even it's kind of surreal because folks will come and make public comment. I'm like, that used to be me, you know, and knowing that there's, you know, what you're saying really can have an impact on the changes that you see within the city. And for myself, if you're coming to make a comment, that means, you know, there was no other solution, and so what you're saying there really truly matters, and to listen to those resident voices. But I think it's also surreal being on the other end of it and thinking, oh yeah, okay, now I'm at the place where these decisions are being made, or things can be changed. But I always want to make sure that I keep that lens as my forefront, because it led me even for my community, encouraged me to run for office. And so, you know, everything, whether, I know folks like to joke that local government just fixes potholes. We do potholes and other things, so potholes are important. But it's also reimagining our communities. You know, we're talking a lot about urban greening right now, and these exciting conversations are happening, multimodal transportation, and even making sure that what kind of multi-use housing is coming to our city, and making sure there's housing options for all, you know, including a young, you know, recent graduate student who is looking for housing in her own district. You know, these are real challenges that even I've experienced finding somewhere affordable to live. Not to mention that a city council member's salary is $100, so it doesn't go very far. So that's why I made the joke that, you know, I'm living up to my immigrant parents and working 2 full-time jobs. But, you know, I'm still learning, it's growing. It's always, the knowledge kind of curve is always growing, and I'm always open to new input, new ideas, and I want to make myself available, whether it's through the different channels of being able to have this conversation with you today, or through social media. I mean, just the other day I was asking folks, you know, what roads in our district would you like to see repaved? Because that's something we do. But we're also imagining, you know, pocket parks or little improvements that really change people's quality of life. And you know, even for example, water is a really big issue right now. That's something that the city's trying to figure out, because fortunately we had so much rain, but then there's also other things of summer is approaching, and how do we prepare for the very, very, very warm summers that we have, and implementing some of the ideas and things I've learned in a city planning program of what reduces our heat island effect is what we're feeling when everything is just pavement and we don't see as many trees. And that's something, those are decisions made, you know, at a city or at the city government level. So hopefully that sums up what I've learned so far with being on the city council and some of the things that we're trying to bring forward, new ideas, but always open to questions or any kind of input or suggestions as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much to all the panelists for taking time out of your day to come talk to us. It really was a rich conversation. You're clapping already. I think we should also, thank you for giving us a brief historical perspective on Chinese migration in Bakersfield. And if you'd like to come back to school, CSU Library, 99 books you can check out. And then one book or one iPad. Yeah. Thank you also to the audience for staying with us. I know we went over, but this was just such a rich and robust conversation. I feel like we need another hour. But I think we do have food left over, so please help yourself. And then, should we take a picture? Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone.